أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So last week we talked about the pillars of Salah. And who remembers how many pillars there were? How many pillars of Salah did we talk about? How many were there altogether? Everyone's forgotten. 14 pillars of Salah. 14 pillars of the prayer. So who can tell me one of those pillars? Start from the beginning. Right from the beginning. Okay, I'll start you off. Standing in the Salah. Yeah, if one is able to do so, he should stand in the prayer. That's one pillar. So standing. The opening takbir, the first takbir that a person does, but as soon as he starts the Salah, that's a pillar. Reciting al-Fatiha, reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. The fourth, bowing, going into ruku'. Rising up from the ruku' is another one. Standing up straight after you do the ruku', and then going into sajda. That's another pillar. And then rising from the sajda, and then sitting between the two prostrations. You have to make sure you sit between the two prostrations, and then being at ease at each of these physical pillars. So you make sure that you're calm and you're relaxed and you're at ease in every single position, and you don't rush when it comes to these different positions. And also the final tashahhud. The final tashahhud before you finish your salah. And then you have to be sitting to recite the final tashahhud, and then the two salams right at the end of the salah. And the last one, the 14th one, who can tell me what the 14th one was? The last pillar. Somebody else. Doing them in the right order. Making sure you do all of these in the right order. So say if I miss out one of the conditions of prayer, or one of the pillars of prayer, what do I have to do? Yeah, repeat the prayer. You have to make sure that you repeat your prayer. Because if you don't have wudu and you're praying and then you realize you don't have wudu, you should leave the prayer. Even if you're right in the middle of the salah, even if you're right in the middle of prayer and you realize while you're praying, even if it's in congregation, even if there's people praying with you, if there's 10, 20 people praying with you and you realize that you don't have wudu, then you should leave the prayer and you should go and do wudu. Yeah? Don't worry about what people are going to say. Most important thing is that your prayer is going to be accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal. So if you don't have wudu, then you should go and perform wudu and then come back and just catch up with the congregation if they're still praying, or just pray separately if they finished. And when it comes to the arkan, the pillars, the same thing. When I was in Medina, I was praying in the Masjid, in the Prophet's Masjid, and we were about to pray the Maghrib prayer. And I was towards the front of the Masjid. And the Iqamah went for the Salah, so everyone stood. And at the front it's very busy, it's always packed at the front. So we started the prayer, and the Imam came. Who's heard of Ali al-Hudayfi? Imam Ali al-Hudayfi. He's one of the Imams of the Masjid in Medina. So he started to lead the prayer. So they made the takbir for the Salah and the Iqamah. They made the Iqamah first, and then he started the Salah. He told everyone to straighten their rows, and he made takbir to start the Salah. So everyone made takbir, and they started to pray behind the Imam. And while we were praying, this was Maghrib prayer, so we were all waiting for Surah Fatiha. We were all waiting for him to recite Surah Fatiha. And instead of reciting Surah Fatiha, the Imam, he said something else. He said, "Intadhiru daqiqa." He said, wait for a minute. In the Salah. So we're praying, and the Imam said this. And everyone's confused, thinking, what's going on? What's wrong with the Imam? And so I thought that the Imam was ill. Maybe he was sick, maybe something bad happened to the Imam. And then a second time he said, "Intadhiru daqiqa." And what happens when you say something outside of the salah, something that's not part of the salah? What happens? your salah's broken. Your salah's broken. So everyone's praying behind the imam, and then the imam says this, and some people don't know what to do because they don't know that now the salah's broken. So some people stayed like this. And when I heard the imam say this, I knew that now the salah's broken. There's no salah anymore. He's telling people to wait for some reason. So I put my hands down and I'm looking around, trying to look at the front to see what's happened. Maybe something bad's happened to the imam. So a few minutes go by and nothing's going on. And everyone's standing waiting. And about 5 minutes go by and everyone's still waiting. And just a few minutes after that, he comes back and he tells everyone to straighten their rows, straighten your rows. And then he starts the salah again. He started the salah again. So everyone's thinking, what happened? What happened to the imam? And if you look, it's recorded. It's actually on YouTube because all the salahs are recorded. When he started the prayer, you can see it on the video. When he starts the prayer, the first time, he starts the prayer and you can tell he's thinking about something. And he's thinking to himself about whether he had wudu or not. And you can imagine the imam of the haram in front of, praying, and he's leading the prayer in front of thousands of people, and he realized maybe he didn't have wudu, and he left and he performed wudu. He left everyone standing there waiting. And that shows you how brave he was. It shows you his iman. That even though he was the imam and he was leading everybody, he left the prayer and he went to do wudu and then he came back. So if the imam is doing this, then it's even more important for us. If we're praying behind the imam, if something happens and we remember that we don't have wudu, or if our wudu breaks, then we should leave the wudu, leave the salah, and perform wudu again. So it just shows you, how important it is, and you shouldn't worry about what other people are going to say, because everyone was saying different things. They didn't know what happened, but the imam still left and made wudu and came back. So it's very important that if you miss out one of these conditions of wudu or the pillars of wudu, then you repeat the salah and you do the salah again. Okay, so today we talked about the pillars of wudu last week. Today we're going to be talking about the wajibat of salah, things which are wajib, things which are obligatory in the salah. Now, what's the difference between a pillar of salah and something which is wajib in salah? A pillar is something, if you leave it deliberately, okay, then that salah doesn't count. If you leave that pillar, even if you forget that pillar, still the salah doesn't count, and you have to repeat the whole prayer. When it comes to obligatory parts of the prayer, if you leave it intentionally, deliberately, then you have to repeat the prayer. And if you forget the obligatory part of the salah, anything which is obligatory, anything which is wajib in the salah, then you have to do it and make sure you go back to that position in the prayer. And if you forget it and you forget the obligatory part of the salah, then you have to do sajdatul sahu. You have to perform the prostration of forgetfulness before you make salam at the end. Okay, so you do sajdatul sahu. So the difference is with a pillar, even if you forget it by accident, and you don't deliberately forget it, but you just forget out of your forgetfulness, then you repeat the salah. But when it comes to a sunnah, okay, if you forget it, okay, while you're in salah, then you do sajdatul sahu at the end. You do the prostration of forgetfulness. And if you forget and you leave the prayer, you finish the prayer, then later you realize and you remember that I forgot to do this in the salah, then you don't go back to the salah. Okay, you don't have to go back to it. If you remember during the salah, what do you have to do? If you remember during the salah, if you remember something that you forgot during the salah, what do you do at the end, before the salam? Prostration of forgetfulness, sajdatul sahu. You have to do the sajdatul sahu before you make the salam.
Ustadh, what about is it like just frustrating?
We're going to talk about those now. We're going to talk about the wajibat, those things which are wajib in the salah, those things which are obligatory. So from those things which are obligatory, there's 6 altogether. There's 6 altogether. From those things which are obligatory is all the other takbirs. Not the first takbir, takbiratul ihram, because takbiratul ihram is a pillar. But the rest of the takbirs that a person does, all the other takbirs that a person does when he goes into sajda, when he goes into ruku, when he goes up from the sajda, all these different takbirs in the salah are obligatory, they're wajib. Okay, they're from the wajibat of salah. So if he forgets any of those, okay, then he should do sajdatul sahu before he makes salam. Yeah. From the other things which are wajib is when he comes up from ruku, he should say Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and the dua for coming back up from the ruku. So that's another obligatory part of the salah. Also, the dua that a person makes in the ruku. Yeah, the dua that a person makes in the ruku, saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. And also the dua, the fourth one, the dua that a person says in the sajda. The dua that a person says in the sajda. Okay, so 4, these are all together so far. 4, the dua, the fourth one, the dua that a person says in the sajda. The fifth one is the dua that a person says between the 2 prostrations. Okay, Rabbi ghfirli warhamni, and that dua that a person says between the 2 sajdas, that's something which is obligatory as well. And the last one is the first tashahhud. So say you're praying a prayer which is more than 2 rak'at. For example, the Dhuhr prayer, or the Asr prayer, or the Maghrib prayer, yeah, or the Isha prayer. If you're praying any of these prayers which are more than 2 rak'at, then if you forget to make the first tashahhud, when you do the first tashahhud? When you do the first tashahhud? What's a tashahhud? Who can tell me what a tashahhud is? What's a tashahhud? A tashahhud, doing the tashahhud. You do it in the second rak'ah, and you do it in the last rak'ah of your salah. So what do you do in the second rak'ah that you don't do in the first rak'ah? And what do you do? And what do you say? Yeah, at-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibat, that dua. That dua is known as tashahhud. Okay, so this tashahhud, okay, the first one that you do in a prayer, the first one that you do in the salah, in the second rak'ah, if it's a salah which is longer than 2 rak'at, if it's not fajr prayer, if it's 3 rak'at or 4 rak'at, then the first tashahhud you do in the second rak'ah, are you all following this? Yeah, the first tashahhud you do, okay, in the second rak'ah, that tashahhud is something which is wajib, is obligatory. So if you forget that, say for example you pray 2 rak'at and you forget to do tashahhud. You forget to do tashahhud and you go up for the third rak'ah. And you forget, and you think, did I perform tashahhud? And you remember you didn't perform tashahhud in the second rak'ah. In this case, okay, you should carry on with your salah as normal. Carry on with your salah as normal, and then before you make salam, you should do prostration of forgetfulness. Yeah, do sajdatul sahu. So you do the sajda and you prostrate 2 times before you make salam. Okay.
Ustadh, you know the Imam in the Green Line, he was reading the Salat al-Zuhr, and then during the last part of the Salah, he did a prostration, and what happened?
Yeah, because he probably forgot something. Yeah, that's why he might have forgotten something in the Salah, okay, and then he did the prostration of forgetfulness because of it.
What about if you do Salam and then you realize that you forgot to do the...
If you remember after the Salam, then you do sajdatul sahu after the salam, if you remember afterwards. Yeah, okay. But if you remember like a while after, maybe you left the masjid, then you remember, then you don't do anything. You don't need to do anything then. But if you remember straight after the salah, then you perform sajdatul sahu. Okay. So these are the obligatory parts of the prayer. Things that if you miss, okay, then you perform sajdatul sahu, the prostration of forgetfulness in the salah, and if you remember them afterwards, then you don't have to do anything. Okay. So there's 6 altogether. Who can go through them with me? Who can give me the first one? First one that I mentioned. Takbir, takbiratul ihram, the first takbir. Which one? The rest of them, all the other takbirs that we do. Can you give me the second one that we mentioned? We mentioned 6 altogether. So the first one was all the different takbirs. The second one we mentioned, when you come back up from ruku', the dua you say, yeah, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, that dua is part of the obligatory things. And there's 2 other du'as. Can you give me the 2 other du'as that are obligatory in the prayer? One that you make in ruku'. What do you say in ruku'? Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. And then the dua you say in sajda, yeah, which is Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when the ayah was revealed, فَسَبِّحْ بِسْمِ رَبِّكَ الْعَظِيمِ, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, make this dua in the ruku'. He told his companions to make this dua in the ruku'. And when Allah revealed the ayah, سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى, the first ayah of Surah A'la in Juz' Amma, in 30th Juz. This first ayah, when it was revealed, he told the companions to say this in your sajda. That's why we say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la in our sajda, and we say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim in our ruku'. Okay, so those things are from the wajibat. Also, between the two prostrations, the dua, Rabbi ighfirli warhamni, that dua we say. And then the first tashahhud that we do. Not the last tashahhud, the first tashahhud. The last tashahhud we do before the salam, that's something which is a pillar. Okay, so these are the obligatory parts of the salah. So now we're going to go through the sunnahs of prayer. And when it comes to the sunnahs, it's those things which are recommended in the salah. And the Prophet ﷺ used to do these things in the prayer. And if a person does them, he's perfecting his salah. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, pray as you have seen me praying. So we want to make sure that when we pray, we're praying exactly how the Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to pray. Yeah? And the closer we are to how the Prophet ﷺ prayed, the more reward we'll get when it comes to our salah. Because two people could be praying in the same place, at the same time, right next to each other, in the same salah, behind the same imam, and they'll be right next to each other, but the reward they'll get is totally different. The reward they'll get is totally different. One person might only get a small amount of reward, or maybe his salah won't even be accepted. And the other person, he'll get lots and lots of reward because of his sincerity, because of how perfectly he's praying and how careful he is when it comes to the salah. So when it comes to this sunnah of the prayer, the recommended things we should do in the salah, we should try to do them and make sure we do them so that we're praying just like the Prophet used to pray. So when it comes to the sunnahs of prayer, there's actions that we do and there's things that we have to say. Okay, so it's two different categories. And from the things that we say, okay, that are sunnah, is after we start the prayer, before we recite Surah Fatiha, we make that dua. Yeah, Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, Subhanakallahumma bihamdika. What's the dua, Aqeel? Do you know the dua, all of it? No, that's not dua. Dua before Surah Fatiha. That's a dua when you finish something. وَتَبَارَكَ اسْمُكَ وَتَعَالَى جَدُّكَ وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُكَ. Very good. So this dua is the dua you say before reciting Surah Fatiha. So it's recommended for a person before he recites Surah Fatiha to make this dua. That's the first thing that a person should say, and it's from the sunnahs of the prayer. The second thing, also, actually there's two more things before he even starts to recite Surah Fatiha. Two more things he should say before he even recites Surah Fatiha. Who can tell me what those two things are? Very, very simple. Two things you should say before you recite Surah Fatiha. Very, very easy. Before that, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And then, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Before he even recites Surah Fatiha. Okay? So those things are the sunnahs of prayer. The dua after the takbir, and then saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And then there's something else that a person should say before he recites another surah, but after al-Fatiha. So before he recites another surah and after he recites Surah Fatiha, saying Ameen, saying Ameen. So when the Imam is reciting and he finishes saying Surah Fatiha, and then the Imam says Ameen, then you should say Ameen after the Imam says Ameen. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever says Ameen, and the angel that's with him, when he recites Ameen and he says Ameen, if that person says Ameen at exactly the same time as the angel says Ameen, then all his past sins are forgiven. all his past sins are forgiven. So it's recommended for a person to make sure that he says Ameen after Al-Fatiha, after the Imam recites Surah Fatiha, okay? And after the Imam says Ameen, then you should say Ameen, okay? So when the Imam says Ameen, then you should say Ameen. And then if your Ameen, okay, is said at the same time as the angels Ameen, then all your past sins will be forgiven. So it's a good opportunity, and it's not difficult, it's not something hard to do. Yeah, you just say Ameen after the Imam recites and he says Ameen, then you say Ameen, and then maybe your past sins will be forgiven as a result of this. Okay, so it's a very easy way, yeah, to make sure that your sins are forgiven. Okay.
What about if it's like the silent prayer?
If it's a silent prayer, then you do it on your own. Yeah, you do it on your own. You say it quietly. Okay. So from the other sunnahs of the prayer is reciting a surah after Surah Fatiha. Okay, reciting a surah after Surah Fatiha. A person should recite a surah after Surah Fatiha. And this is one of the best ways, of remembering what you've learnt and going over what you've already memorized from the Quran. Sometimes we get into the habit of reciting the same surah or the same two surahs after Surah Fatiha in every single prayer. Okay, but a person should try to change what he's reciting, okay, so that he remembers what he's memorized. You don't want to forget what you've already memorized from the Quran. Okay, and even if you are learning and you're memorizing new surahs, it's a good idea to read those surahs in the salah, in your prayer, so that you don't forget them. Yeah, so it's a good way of keeping your hifz strong and making sure you don't forget those surahs that you've learnt over time. It's good practice for you. Yeah, so a person should try to make sure, and because you're in the salah and the Quran is in front of you, your memory is working even harder to try to remember what ayah comes next. Sometimes if you're memorizing Quran or you're reading to somebody and the mushaf's in front of you and the Quran's in front of you, you're easily tempted to look at it every time you make a mistake. But when you're standing in salah, you have to always use your memory, and so it improves your memory. Yeah, it makes your hifz stronger. So these 4 things are from the things that a person should do when it comes to the salah. Yeah, the things that a person should do when it comes to the salah. From the actions that a person should do, when it comes to the salah is raising the hands when he starts the salah. When he does takbiratul ihram. When he does takbiratul ihram, he should make sure that he raises his hands when he starts the salah. And who can tell me why we raise our hands when we start the salah? Obviously because the Prophet ﷺ used to do it, but why else? Well,
So it's
okay.
like saying that the whole verse behind us, we only focus on the salah.
Yeah, good. So some of the scholars, they say that one of the benefits, one of the reasons why is when we put our hands up, okay, by our ears or by our shoulders. You can do either. Yeah, so you can raise your hands up to here, you can raise your hands up to your shoulders or up to the bottom of your ears. When you raise your hands up to there, it's as if you're not thinking about anything else. You're thinking, I'm not worried about anything else, I'm going to focus on the salah, and then you start the salah. So you're not worried about anything else that's taking place. You know, for example, sometimes somebody tells you, have you done this, or do you remember what happened that day? And you say, forget about that, don't worry about that. And you put your hands up. You say, forget about that, don't worry, it's not important, I'm not interested in that. Huh? So you use that action to say that you're not interested, you don't want to talk about it, you want to forget about that thing, you're not interested in that thing, you don't care about that. When you pray, it's a similar thing, because you're saying you're not interested in anything else except the salah. Everything else is behind you. Nothing is more important than the salah at this time. Nothing is more important than the prayer. Okay, so you're focusing totally on the prayer. And that's why some of the companions, when they used to pray, it's narrated that when they would pray, people would see them and they would look like statues. They would look like statues. What does that mean, they would look like statues? That's how focused they were. So it was as if they weren't even moving. So they were so still when they were praying, and they wouldn't even move a muscle when they prayed. It was as if they were statues. It was as if they were statues, because they wouldn't even move. They wouldn't move when it came to, the salah. They were so focused on their salah and so focused about what they were reading, they wouldn't move an inch, they wouldn't move a muscle. And that's why it's important for a person, when he's praying, not to move around or not to, fidget It's not something which is recommended. Sometimes a person's praying and he's fidgeting about, he's scratching and he's, fiddling about and he's checking his phone and he's checking his watch and he's looking at the time and doing all these things in the salah. And then even the person next to him is distracted because he's fidgeting about. So you get distracted in the salah. That's something which a person shouldn't do. Okay, what happens if you're praying and your mobile phone goes off? What happens if your mobile phone goes off and it's a really loud tune? Aqeel?
You should pick it up and switch it off, but don't look at the phone.
Okay, good. So you should pick it up and you should turn it off and put it back in your pocket. Yeah? So you shouldn't let it ring. Some people, they think, oh no, my phone's ringing. What shall I do? Just focus, pretend it's not me. Then we just carry on praying and hope nobody finds out that it's me praying. And then at the end of the salah, he gets told off by everybody. No, if your phone goes off during the salah, then you just turn it off. Turn your phone off because you're disturbing everybody else. You don't want to keep on ringing. And some people, when they pray and they've got their phones on, they've got like music on their phone. So the whole salah is like a song playing, and that really distracts a person when it comes to the salah. So a person should, if his phone rings, he should turn it off. Yeah, as soon as it rings, he should just turn it off and put it on silent and turn it off and put it back in his pocket. It shouldn't be, shouldn't leave it on because people will get distracted then.
Ustadh, it's meant to be, the Imam even says switch off your phones.
Yeah, the Imam tells everyone before the salah to make sure you switch off your mobile phones. But people don't listen, do they? Sometimes people don't listen and they don't pay attention. So people still don't turn their phones off. Because when you hear something done all the time, when you hear someone saying the same thing over and over again, you get used to it sometimes. And it doesn't register. Yeah? It's like when your parents tell you to do your homework, tell you every single day, and it just becomes normal and you're not interested anymore. And you lose your attention. Yeah? And you forget about it because you're hearing it all the time. Yeah, so it's always good to remember to try to do it even before you come into the masjid. Just turn your mobile phone off, yeah, or put it on silent at least, so that it doesn't disturb anyone in the salah. Okay. And once one of my friends, he was saying we were praying in the Haram in Medina, okay, in the masjid, and somebody's phone went off, and he picked up the phone and he started to talk to the person while he was praying on the telephone, on the mobile phone. And he's telling him, I'm praying, I'm in the masjid, while he's praying. And so he's distracting everybody else in the salah. And is he still praying now? Is his prayer valid? No, his prayer isn't valid anymore because he spoke and he said something which isn't part of the salah. He said something which isn't part of the salah. So you can't do that. And it shows you how people don't know. Some people, they don't know. They don't know these things. So it's very important, okay, to educate them and to tell them. If you know something and you see someone doing something wrong, you should try to tell them in a nice way that this isn't allowed and that they shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. So it's very important that a person doesn't fidget or move around when it comes to the salah. So after this, raising the hands, from the things that a person also should do is raising the hands when he goes into ruku'. So the first thing is when he starts, and then raising the hands when he goes into ruku'. Okay, and the third is raising the hands when he goes back up from ruku'. So there's three things, okay, which are all the same, raising the hands in three parts. Going into ruku', coming back up from ruku', and when you start the salah. So when you start the salah, going into ruku', the bowing position, and coming back up from the bowing position. Sometimes some people, okay, they raise their hands when they go into sajda. So when they come back up from ruku', they raise their hands and they go into sajda. Is this allowed? This isn't something which the Messenger of Allah used to do. He never used to raise his hands before he used to go into sajda. He never used to do that. He used to raise his hands when he used to start the salah and when he used to go into the ruku', and when he used to come back up from the ruku', from the bowing position. But when he used to go into sajda, he never used to raise his hands. And the companions, all the companions, they used to raise their hands, and some of the companions were very, very strict when it came to raising their hands when you start your salah. They say one of the companions was who used to always do what the Prophet ﷺ used to do. And he used to always follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in every single thing. He used to copy the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in every single thing. And this companion, his name was Abdullah ibn Umar. And who was Abdullah ibn Umar's father? Abdullah ibn Umar's father, Umar radiallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah, the son of Umar. So you know that his father was Umar radiallahu anhu. So he used to always do whatever the Messenger of Allah sallallahu used to do. Whatever the Messenger of Allah used to do, he used to do the same thing. Yeah. So he used to pray exactly how the Messenger of Allah used to pray. And when he used to travel, say he was traveling from one city to another, he would take the same route as the Prophet ﷺ. Exactly the same route. Exactly the same route as the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. Even though there might have been a newer way to travel. Maybe because even after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he used to travel and go to different cities exactly the same way and the same route that the Prophet ﷺ used to take. Even though there might have been newer routes and better routes and easier routes and quicker routes to travel there, he never used to take them. He used to always take the routes that the Prophet ﷺ used to take because he loved the Prophet ﷺ so much. And not only that, but he used to stop at exactly the same places that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to stop at. So when he used to travel and he would stop at a certain place to rest, Abdullah ibn Umar would stop and rest in exactly those same places. So if there was a specific place he would rest, he would go and he would rest in that exact same place. He didn't have to, but he would follow the Prophet ﷺ so much that this is, you know, how much he would follow him. Even where he rested, he would rest. And wherever the Prophet ﷺ used to pray, he would pray in the exact same place. That's how much he used to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So it shows you how important it is to follow the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in every single thing. And so he used to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ very, very closely. And they say when he used to see someone not raising their hands when they used to start the prayer, he used to throw stones at them to show them that what they're doing is wrong and that they're not doing what the Prophet ﷺ used to do when it came to the prayer and when it came to the salah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, pray as you have seen me praying. So he was very, very strict and he used to make sure people used to pray just as the Prophet ﷺ used to pray. So reciting the surah after Fatiha. So these four things are the things that a person says and they're from the sunnahs of the salah. Yeah. The takbir or the dua after the takbir, and also the isti'adha and the basmala. Saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then saying Ameen after Surah Fatiha, and then reciting a surah after Surah Fatiha. Okay. And when it comes to the sunnahs of the prayer, there's sayings, as we mentioned, things that a person should say, and there's also things that a person should do. Okay. And from the things that a person should do is, first of all, we mentioned raising the hands and bowing and rising from the bowing. And the fourth thing, so we mentioned raising the hands in 3 different places. The fourth thing that a person should do when it comes to the actions is looking towards a specific place while he's praying. Where does he look when he's praying? Okay?
When he's doing sujood.
Yeah, so he should look where he's going to be prostrating. Okay? Where he's going to be prostrating. So a person, when he's praying, okay, he shouldn't be distracted. And he shouldn't be looking here and there, looking at his friend and looking at that person there and how he's praying and looking at the time and, you know, looking all around, looking outside and seeing if his car's okay and no one's stolen his bike or anything like this. He should be looking down at the place where his head is going to be when he performs the prostration. Why is it so important to look down at the place of prostration? Very good. So you're focused. That's what the scholars used to say. They used to say that a person is more focused and is more concentrated, has more concentration and is focusing more on the salah when he's looking at the place that he does the sajda, because now he's not distracted and he's not looking here or there and he's not worried about, you know, what's happening outside, what's happening to that person in front of him, or, you know, looking at some kids who are playing maybe, you know, in another part of the masjid, and his eyes aren't going to be distracted. So if he's focused on the place where he's going to perform the prostration, then he can focus on the salah. Yeah, he can focus on the salah and he can make sure that his salah is good and that Allah Azza wa Jal is going to accept his salah. So those are the sunnahs of the prayer, the sunnahs of salah. Okay. Now, when it comes to these things, we mentioned the wajibat of salah, the obligatory things of the salah, and we mentioned the sunnahs of the salah. So now, what I want to do is go through some of the things which invalidate the prayer. Things which invalidate the prayer, things which invalidate the salah. So who can tell me some things which would break the salah? Very good. Talking in the salah. Saying things that a person shouldn't be saying in the prayer. If a person is saying something, he's having a conversation or he's saying something in a different language, in the prayer, then that thing will break his salah, because the Prophet ﷺ never used to say those things. Okay. So saying something, in the salah which isn't part of the salah. The only exception to this is when a person makes dua, because the Prophet ﷺ told the people to make dua in the sajda. So a person can make dua in Arabic or in any other language in the sajda. But as for anything else, then if he says anything else which isn't part of the salah, and he starts talking to somebody else in the salah, so he's praying next to somebody and he starts talking to that person, which he shouldn't be doing, because he's in the presence of Allah Azza wa Jal. Yeah, you're in the presence of Allah when you're praying. Okay, and if you were with, in class, and your teacher told you to listen, then you wouldn't be talking to the person next to you, otherwise you get told off. Now imagine when you're praying to Allah Azza wa Jal. Imagine if you're praying to Allah Azza wa Jal and you start talking to the person next to you while you're praying. It's an even bigger sin. And even if he did something small, sometimes a person might do a small sin. And he might say, oh, this is only a small thing, even though this isn't a small thing, this is a serious thing because your salah's broken. But say someone does a sin outside of salah, something else, something different. A person shouldn't look at the smallness of the sin. He shouldn't think, oh, this is only a small sin, it's okay. Maybe he said something bad or he did something bad. Okay, you think it's okay, it's only something small, it's nothing big, no big deal. But a person shouldn't look at the smallness of the sin. Okay, some of the companions or some of the scholars of the past, they would say, don't look at the smallness of the sin, but look at the greatness of who you have sinned against. Because you've sinned against Allah Azza wa Jal, and you've disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even if that action that you did and that sin you committed was something which is very small, you've disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a serious thing. Okay, so talking in the salah is something which isn't allowed. Talking in the salah is something which isn't allowed because it nullifies the prayer. It makes the prayer disallowed. Okay, it doesn't. Allah Azza wa Jalla won't accept that prayer because you've started to say something which isn't part of it. Okay, something else which invalidates the salah.
Looking around.
Looking around is something which a person shouldn't do, but doesn't invalidate the salah. Looking up. Okay, looking up, yeah. Something else that no one's mentioned yet. Very good, breaking your wudu. If a person breaks wudu, then he has to leave the salah and he has to perform wudu again. If he breaks the wudu, then he needs to make sure that he performs the wudu again, because his salah is invalid now. His salah is invalid, and Allah won't accept that salah because now he doesn't have wudu anymore. So these things are things which, if a person does them in the salah, then his salah is invalid. His salah is invalid. Okay. So from the other things that I want to mention about salah are a few things. For example, the Jum'ah prayer, Salatul Jum'ah. Yeah, Salatul Jum'ah is something which every single person should try to attend. It's something which a person has to attend, the Jum'ah prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said about the Jum'ah prayer that it's the Eid, that Muslims have 2 Eids in the year, and they have 1 Eid of the week. So every single week a person has an Eid, and that Eid is Friday. That day of celebration is Friday. Okay, and on this Friday a person performs the Jum'ah prayer. Yeah, so it's important for a person to attend this Jum'ah prayer, Okay, and also when it comes to the 2 Eid prayers, when it comes to the Jum'ah prayer, a person, when he attends the Jum'ah, does he pray 4 or does he pray 2?
2.
He prays 2. The Jum'ah prayer is 2 rak'at. The Jum'ah prayer is 2 rak'at. Say for example he goes to the masjid for the Jum'ah prayer and the Imam's given salam and he's finished the salah. The Imam's finished the salah and you've come late. So you come into the masjid and now the Imam he's finished the prayer, so you can't pray with the Imam anymore. So now you're thinking, how much do I pray? Because it's Friday and it's Dhuhr time. So do I pray 2 or do I pray 4? Okay?
Because Jummah is a congregation prayer, you have to pray. You can't pray 2 alone, but you can pray. You have to pray Zuhr.
Okay, very good, excellent. So when it comes to the 2 that a person prays for the Jumu'ah prayer, this is specific to the Imam when he's praying and when you're praying in congregation. There's a specific time for it. And that time is when the Imam is praying, and if you join the Imam, then you pray 2 rak'at. Okay, but if you miss the prayer of the Imam on Friday, the Jumu'ah prayer, then a person, prays 4 just like any normal Dhuhr prayer. Okay, because now that time and that opportunity to pray 2 has gone. So if he misses the congregational prayer by the Imam, then he should pray 4 just like any other Dhuhr prayer that he prays during the week. Yeah. So that's something that a person should do. Also, the Eid prayers. The Eid prayers are one of the prayers that a person prays. Yeah, the Eid prayers are salat that a person prays on Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, and these prayers are 2 rak'at each. Yeah, 2 rak'at which a person prays, and this prayer is different to other prayers because there are more than 1 takbir at the beginning.
7 or 8.
Yeah. So in the first rak'ah, of these Eid prayers, there's 7 takbirs, and in the second rak'ah there's 5 takbirs. Yeah. So it's a different type of prayer than to the one that we pray normally. Yeah, because of the amount of takbirs that a person has. And also when it comes to the prayer, did I talk about the prostration of forgetfulness?
Yeah.
Did I talk about prostration of forgetfulness? Did I mention that?
Yeah.
Did I talk about when you do the prostration of forgetfulness?
Yeah.
Okay, so when do you do it after the salam? Did I mention that? When you do it after and when you do it before? Okay, so when it comes to prostration of forgetfulness, doing sujood sahu, when it comes to sujood sahu, actually who can tell me, some people they say sujood sahu, and some people they say sajdatu sahu. Somebody else. Who can tell me what's the difference? Some people say sujood sahu, and some people say sajdatu sahu. What's the difference between the two? You're close. So what's the difference between sajdatu sahu and sujood sahu?
Sujood more than one.
Okay, good. So sujood, is the plural of sajda. Sajda means 1 prostration. Prostration, just 1. And sujood is the plural of sajda. And when a person does sujood sahu, it's 2 sajdas. It's 2 sajdas. So a person does 2 sajdas. Now when does a person do sajdatu sahu? Before the salam, and when does he do it after the salam? I didn't mention this. Have I mentioned this before? No. Okay. When it comes to sujood sahu, if a person misses something out or he forgets something, then he does it before the salam. So he does sujood sahu before the salam. So if you forget something or you leave something out, or you pray less than what you were supposed to pray, then you do the sajdatu sahu before the salam. And you do 2 sajdas. So just before you're going to give the salam, once you made the dua, and once you send peace and blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ, then before the salam, you do sajdatu sahu. And what do you say in the sajda, in this sajda? Whatever you say in your normal sajda, the same thing. So you say the same thing and you do 2 sajdas and then you give your salam. If you add something to the salah, maybe you increased something, maybe you prayed an extra rak'ah, or you increased in a in something else, then in this case you pray and you do the sajda to sahu after the salam. So you make salam and then you do 2 sajdas. And once you do these 2 sajdas, do you give salam? Who can tell me? What do you think? Do you give salam after you make these 2 sajdas? So you finish the salah and you give salam, okay, and then you do the two sajdas. Do you give salam again?
No.
No, why not? Okay.
Because you've given salam the first time.
Very good. Because what do you give salam for? After the prayer. So the 2 sajdas, okay, were they in prayer? No, they were outside of prayer. So you don't do salam after you perform these 2 sajdas. Yeah, you don't do salam after you perform these 2 sajdas. So those are the 2 parts, the 2 times that a person should perform sujood al-sahu. Okay. So these are the things that I wanted to mention today about the salah. We talked about the wajibat of salah. We talked about the sunnahs of prayer. Yeah, and the sunnahs of prayer were the actions that a person says, and also the things that a person says. Okay. Is there any questions?
If you're in a congregational prayer and Imam's in the first rak'ah and he's done ruku, and you join at that time, do you then have to repeat that?
No, you don't have to repeat that rak'ah again. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever man adraka rak'ah faqad adraka salah. Whoever has made that ruku, then he's made the rak'ah. He's made the rak'ah.
Even though they missed out a few pillars at the start, not really.
Yeah, because the Prophet ﷺ explicitly mentioned. So he mentioned that whoever makes the ruku, then he's made the whole of the rak'ah. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said. Yeah, so if the Prophet ﷺ hadn't said it, then we wouldn't think it was part of the, we wouldn't think we would have made the rak'ah, because he said that a person who makes the rak'ah, the ruku, then he's made the whole rak'ah. He doesn't have to repeat the whole rak'ah again. So say the Imam's bowing and you make the salah, okay, while he's bowing, then you've made that rak'ah. You don't have to repeat that rak'ah again, because the Prophet said, whoever makes the rak'ah, the ruku, and the bowing position, then he has made that whole rak'ah. Any more questions?
Do you get sin for breaking your salah?
No, it's only sinful if you don't perform the wudu, if you don't repeat the wudu, if you don't repeat the salah, yeah. Because now, if you've broken your wudu and you're still praying, you shouldn't be praying because your salah isn't accepted. And if you know you've broken your wudu, then you should repeat your prayer. So if you leave and you repeat the prayer and you do wudu again, there's no sin upon you. That happens. Yeah, a person can break his wudu like that. Nothing wrong with that. He just has to make sure he does wudu and then he prays again. Any more questions? Any questions from the sisters? That question? Okay. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.